All right, I think we're recording now. Perfect. So, what's up, y'all? I'm Emmy. I'm a sophomore and I'm a social work major.
Sweet. I'll go this way, I guess. I'm Jessica. I'm a senior and I'm a psychology major.
Hi, I'm Shelby. I'm a second semester junior and I'm a psych education studies major.
I'm Greta. I'm a junior and I'm a psychology major.
I'm Hannah. I'm a junior and I'm a child development major and minor in social work.
Awesome. Perfect. So, if we would just want to dive into what we thought, y'all just want to go like video and then the different things, or should we just all kind of go all at once? Just
I
check.
guess like all at once, maybe.
Okay.
Like just kind of go for it. And like whoever has like a starting thought, we can just like spiral off of it, I guess.
Yeah. Does anyone want to start with anything?
I thought it was interesting in the video when he said like it's white privilege to say you don't have white privilege. I thought that was like a really interesting phrase that he used, and they kind of touched it in the articles too.
Yeah, going off of that, I feel like a lot of like what we learned in the videos and the readings like honestly correlated like with a lot of the stuff we talked about in class today, like with that reading that talked about like the 1 through 10 like reasons that like you like see white privilege and everything. I don't know. I thought like the video helped really explain like honestly like our ignorance to white privilege sometimes, just in the sense of like staying in our comfort zone and like wanting to do things that are just like comfortable to us and being educated. Yeah. So I really liked the readings.
Yeah, I think like what really struck me about like the resources was the discussion of like how sort of in like white privilege is kind of, it can be like implicit too, like how in one of the articles she was talking about these white people would like show up to like race and diversity like conferences and be like taking up the whole conversation and just like thinking that they were like okay and like doing the right thing by being there, but then we're just like that one like white woman who walked up to her afterwards and was like that was great and everything, but like how is that going to help me make more black friends or like something awful like that, like just I don't know, like the selfishness and all of it, like just the way that there's a right and wrong way to be an activist, I think.
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes back to what we've been saying. It's like when we're talking about conversations of inclusivity and diversity, like it's not about you. It's not like, oh, what can I get? What can I learn? It's like what are your peers saying? Like what is happening in the general atmosphere and what can we like collectively as a group, like what can we do and how are like other people going through life and stuff. And so like you're saying, when these people come to these conferences and they interrupt and they're like, okay, this is great, but I'm not learning anything, like are you even trying to learn? Like just because it doesn't pertain to your situation doesn't mean you can't take something from it. Is like from that reading that I got.
Yeah, and I think Professor Donovan has done a really good job of picking articles that build on one another, that creates a better scope of just one's cultural humility. That's what the whole class is about, and I think she's been doing a really good job because every single article we've had to read and every single TED Talk we've had to watch, they've kind of built in different areas on cultural humility, and I thought this was a really important component as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And like the video, there was one part where he was saying how like a lot of times the people that like have the strongest opinion about race and stuff, they know nothing about it and stuff like that. And I feel like it's very easy, especially as you're coming to college, like to have all these opinions, like, oh, like there's so much going on. I have to have an opinion on something without educating yourself. So I'm really glad that we have this time to like kind of bounce ideas off one another and like learn from one another because it's so important, like if we're gonna go into like helping professions and stuff like that, that we have a great grasp on like what's happening in the world and that we can be culturally competent. for like our peers and our clients' sake.
Yeah, I think like just the way that people tend to think, like I found the argument really interesting about the whole like I don't see color phenomenon, like the way that people tend to think it's a good thing to say that. I was like thinking about it more, and I feel like that statement is kind of akin to the whole like all lives matter movement. Like a lot of people think when they say that they're like doing a good thing, but it like they're the same in the way that they both like diminish the struggles that like people of color face. Like the point is that like we're giving them the space to speak, and so saying like I don't see color is just like not acknowledging the fact that like they like we aren't the same because they've been treated differently this whole time. So it's like unfair for us to be like, oh yeah, like guys, come on. You know, it's like I feel like a lot of that like activism like performed by white people is just to like aid their own emotional discomfort. And it's like inherently selfish in that way.
Yeah, like kind of going off of that. Sorry, Emmy.
No, you're good. You're good.
Always struggle. But like something that like I noticed in the article, like especially pertaining to like the Black Lives Matter movement, because I feel like this movement has like enlightened a lot of like people that are outside of the Black community about just like the constant like oppression and like just systemic oppression that has been going on in this country for like centuries since it was founded. And like something that I found, I'm gonna like pull a direct quote that like one of the articles said. It was like a status that someone posted on their social media saying, if your anti-racism work prioritizes the growth and enlightenment of white America over the safety, dignity, and humanity of people of color, it's not anti-racism work, it's white supremacy. And I just like thought that was such a powerful outlook, because I mean, I know a lot of like one of my best friends in high school, Camille, like she's Black, and she grew up in like a very predominantly white high school in middle school. And so she had like so many people reaching out to her that were white being like, how do I like be a part of this movement? And it almost just like made it seem like they were just trying to cover themselves up and be like, how do I not come across as racist kind of thing, instead of just like trying to educate themselves on like how to be empowering and to be encouraging towards this movement. And I think like we like try and claim things as our own in situations like that, and it's just not our place. Just being like, hey, like we're allies and we're here for whatever you need is like enough in and of itself. Not enough, there's never going to be enough, but you know what I mean, just knowing our place kind of thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that's one of the biggest like frustrations that I've had with like activism the last few years is like the social media activism of like, oh, I'll repost this thing so it looks like I'm an ally, but then you scroll on people's feed and like there's no pictures of people of color, people who are different than them. Like there's no like capturing of memories of like them trying to make an effort with people who have different identities, I guess. And like not saying that people's social profiles are like who they are all as a whole person, but it's like don't try and cover up your own guilt that you feel with like harvesting off of like a movement that should be positive, you know what I'm saying? And like as someone, so like when the Asian hate movement was happening or whatever, like I've been experiencing Asian hate my whole life, like it's nothing new. So I was kind of unfazed. I was like cute, make a graphic, like whatever, you know. But like I was glad that awareness was being raised because it should be. But I had friends reaching out to me like, Emmy, are you okay? And I was like, dude, I'm fine. Like this has been happening, like it's nothing new. So I just think it's like making a constant effort when it's not a trend to do something is extremely important. Like it's not just like when it's popular to post about it that we care about the Black Lives Matter movement, or we reach out to our Asian friends when it's trendy. Like these should be consistent efforts that we're making, not only as like advocates for those who don't have a voice, but also like just as people who care about one another kind of thing.
I totally understand what you're saying and where you're coming from, because my best friend went through the same thing. She's from China, and when the Asian hate thing was going around, everybody was reaching out, and she was like, you know, you can tell your true friends when there's people that have been around you and supported you the whole entire time, and then when something happens, there are people that come out of the woodwork and they act like they care, you know?
Yeah, and I feel like even like especially with Black Lives Matter and the movement and just like the way that it like spiked in interest, it was almost like everyone was like, let's post to like cover up our butts and like make sure no one sees us as racist. Like if I don't make a statement that I'm racist, instead of being like, how do I educate myself and how do I like really advocate for this movement? So like that was a big frustration of mine. I was like, y'all are just trying to cover your butts up. Like I don't really see any actual activism going on. And yeah, like if you really support this movement and want to make a stance, then you should really advocate for it in like your actual life instead of just like posting a story on Instagram, you know? So
Also, a lot of people would go to the protests and know nothing about the actual movement. I think it's extremely important to educate yourself on what you're protesting so you have the factual information to make your argument.
Yeah, and that's like what Cabrera's like point is in his video. It's like people who think they know a lot about race or have super strong opinions, like they don't know anything, which is why it's so important that if we do have an opinion, we have the evidence, we have the right mindset, we have like the data that can back up like what we're saying, kind of like in those sources when like those 10 points in that one article and how it had like hyperlinks to different things, like there's evidence and testimonies of like how these things are actually occurring in real life.
I think like another like kind of like evidence of it like kind of being a trend was when I think it was like a blackout day or something where everyone just like posted a black picture, but then like a week later, a couple of days later, like they all deleted them. So then like yeah, it was good for that one day, but then it was just kind of a trend that everyone just had that and then they all deleted them.
yeah, and even going off of that, I know that that was a big problem within the movement in the community because people were like hashtagging like Black Lives Matter, completely drowning out all of this evidence. Like if you clicked on the hashtag, it was just a ton of black screens instead of like a ton of information about the movement, and like almost like worked in an opposite effect where like it just like drowned out the important stuff and was like, yeah, just a frustrating trend in my opinion. But yeah.
That also relates back to what Emmy was saying about the article where she talks about sometimes the people that act like they're the most informed are the least informed. That goes right along with that whole movement or post.
Right, and like how in the TED Talk, sorry, I feel like I'm talking a lot, but how in the TED Talk, like he was talking about how the people that tend to have like the most opinions about this are like the least educated. And it's like if you're gonna have this big voice and this big thought process and sharing all of this and like sharing all of your thoughts and opinions, like it's in your best interest to be educated about it, and most of the time people that have like the biggest voice and say in their own opinions are like the least. So I thought that was like very powerful to say.
Did anything else kind of surprise anyone, or did they take anything else from like the resources or anything? I'm gonna like answer my own question, but I wanted to like get y'all thinking. But so I'm in social work 2020 right now as well, the American social welfare history class, and then I'm also in an anthropology class called gender, race, and class. So it's kind of cool because in both of the, or at least one of the articles, the confronting racism is not about the feelings and needs of white people. It talked about, or wait, maybe it was the other article. Oh no, it was the biological one. It talked about like the skulls thing with like how they lined up like the African and the Asian skulls, and I actually learned about that a few weeks ago in my anthropology class. And then it talked about like how just like how white people didn't used to just be white people. It used to be like your nationality, like Irish, Italian, Slavic, Greek, like all these different things. And it's like people think like white supremacy doesn't exist, but it's like there's always been a superior group in the United States, and it's like in the TED Talk when he was talking about, or maybe it wasn't, there's so many resources, but it was talking about how like white people, like the rich white people were like, oh man, if we have these poor white people and they get together, Native Americans and slaves, like they might be able to overthrow us. So now it's like, well, you're not, at least you're not, you're still, you're not, okay, sorry. you're not poor, or you're still poor, but at least you're white kind of thing. So it's like, then it became like whiteness as a whole instead of like rich white, poor white, whatever nationality kind of thing. And so it's just like, there's always been laws like in social work 2020, like there was literally laws where Asians couldn't purchase land, or Black people can't vote, or there's just all these things that are against people of color. So it's crazy to think that people think like white supremacy doesn't exist kind of thing, you know? Sorry, that was so much. I was trying to formulate all of that in my brain.
Yeah, it's almost like there's just so much history that it's just like, how can you not believe that this exists? Yeah, I think I get into frustrating conversations with like the older generation, like my parents' generation, where a lot of them are just like very conservative and ignorant in their own white supremacy, where it's like, bruh, how have you not seen all of these levels of oppression that have gone on, and just like the fact that our country has been founded and established on racism? It's really frustrating sometimes.
Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, I want to say like this is my own privilege, like being still surprised when I hear about like comments that are made today towards people of color, like I like microaggressions or just like blatant racist comments. Like, I mean, I want to go back to something you actually talked about today in class. You mentioned like a comment that was made to your boyfriend about like him getting, I think it was some like level of achievement that like he should have been proud of. Um, and like it was insinuated that he would have gotten it because he was like a minority group and like that's what they were looking for. And it's just like, so I didn't get a chance to say anything in class, but like the way my jaw dropped, like I just, the audacity of people, like I don't, the fact that that was said like to his face, like not only does that like undermine his achievements, but it also like implies that he somehow had an unfair advantage, like being a person of color. So yeah, definitely I feel like I it's my privilege that makes it so like I'm still shocked by those comments, but like I don't know, I don't see like how that can keep happening. I think I'm like in a bubble in that way. Like everyone that I interact with is very like into the movement and like understanding it more. And then I feel like you step right outside of that and it's like there's still people that are so like ignorant and unfair. So
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, it was so unfortunate. It's hard to hear because it's like, so my boyfriend's Black. He goes to, well, his family said they're African. They're African. They're from Ethiopia, and he goes to UNC. And yeah, he was talking about this big internship that he's wanting to get, and he's like busted his butt since like junior year of high school, like doing all these like things, getting all these connections, working super hard. Like he's just like up here if anyone's like killing the game, you know. And I've been so proud of him since day one. And yeah, he went up to this kid who was like sitting by himself, and he was like alone in this like social situation. He felt bad for him, so he's like, oh, like let me go talk to him. And then afterward, when he left, he was like, yeah, I realized why no one was sitting with him is because he's kind of a jerk. And I was like, well, at least he tried to build that connection. But yeah, it was like for him to say to his face like, oh, like the only reason you're getting that is because you know. And then for Jonas to have to say like, why do I know? And then for the guy not to have the guts to like say what he really thought, like I just thought that was super cowardly. And like that's happened to him. Like I pointed at it like at a grocery store. He was making small talk with this one woman and she was like, oh, like I'm really happy you got all those like offers, but you know why you did, right? And he was like, no, why did I? And she was like, well, you know, because your race. And she's like, my daughter goes to ECU and plays instruments and she doesn't get any of these opportunities. And he was like, what are you talking about? So it's like there's definitely things that still happen in people who don't make an effort. And it is really frustrating, but it's also like I feel good to expose ourselves to it because then we can be cognizant of like small things that we might not even think are insults, but like can be taken that way. Cause like even though I'm Asian, like I'm not perfect and I definitely have my own biases. So it's just like I don't know. It's definitely frustrating, but it's good to like be aware. And I'm glad that were able to like learn something from that, Greta.
Yeah, I also like wish that I had had time to comment because it pissed me off so much. Because like people would say that to my best friend Camille because she also just like worked her butt off. Like she's literally like got into law school and has worked so hard for her achievements. And it's like, oh yeah, like queen energy. And it's like, bruh, like why do you have to be such a Debbie Downer and like pull the race card and say that she has this unfair advantage when she's worked her butt off for this? Yeah, and also like the fact that like your boyfriend like has called those people out and been like, okay, like why and like for what, and then they hesitate, just shows that they know what they're saying is like not okay and absolutely like inconsiderate to be saying in a time like this. And I think a lot of people like say stuff like that and have the mentality, and then when people call them out on it, they're like, oh, and then they're silent and like cowardice because they know what they're doing is wrong. So anyways, yeah.
Yeah. Also, the fact that they like clearly expected that they would be able to say something and not get called out on it, like says something in itself.
I think also like whenever they kind of hesitate to say what they were like actually meaning, they can also sometimes be like, oh, they're just being like sensitive about it. When like it's clearly like on them, they're being racist, but like they're like, oh, like why do you have to take it to that level? When like that's where the level is going.
Yeah, and I think one of the articles pointed that out too, where it's like, oh, you're being so sensitive, like you're making a problem out of it. When it's like, no, bro, like you're being racist right now. Like, and people just can't come to the terms of like that they're in the wrong. And I think like that's a way to kind of protect that power status of like, if I'm never wrong, like that doesn't jeopardize me in any way, you know? And that video where it was like, the guy who was super passionate in class that we watched and then had a discussion on, how he was like, we're on the receiving end of things. Like, this is not our fault. Like, we didn't do nothing. Like, this is very much like a problem y'all got to think about. Like, you can't just keep deflecting kind of thing. So I'm really glad you pointed that out, Hannah. So we are approaching the 22-minute mark. So do you guys want to move on to number 2 of how do we think this information will help inform our future practices? I'm like really interested to hear you guys because we're all different majors. So I kind of want to hear what y'all want to do.
I think personally for me, like I am wanting to do family and marriage therapy, like specifically with lower income families. And like, unfortunately, that means I'm probably going to be working with a lot of minorities just because of our economic system and yeah, just all the history behind it. So just like being informed about like maybe some like unintended biases that I'm going to like have towards like people of color. And that's like not even like, I think in my brain I'm like, oh, like I'm so aware of these things, like there's no way I'm gonna get like sidetracked by them. But like listening to the TED Talk and hearing these articles, it's just like so ingrained in us as a society to think in some of the ways that we do, that like I just like have to be so conscious when I'm working with clients and families of like making sure that I'm like as educated and aware about like their situations as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like in my practices, the most important thing I feel like would be to approach it from a perspective of someone who like still always has more to learn, like not ignorance, but just like openness to like hearing something that you didn't know and like being wrong also, because obviously like it would be my job to help, but I don't like, I can never like put myself in their shoes, and it would be like, I know people say like, yeah, I understand, but I will never understand. So I feel like all I can do is like use the resources that I would have and like listen and like amplify what they had to say.
So I want to be a child life specialist, which like if you don't know what that is, kind of like a pediatric social worker in a hospital, kind of like helping families through like those traumatic times. And I think with that, like how this relates is in one, I think it was the last article, it talked about how you can't talk about any issue without talking about how race informs it. And so like there might be, I mean, there very well could be like minorities whose children are having surgeries and stuff like that. And so it's kind of my job to figure out if they need any extra support because of like economic stances, because of how economic stuff plays into race. And so kind of stuff like that is just being aware of how whatever race it is affects what they could be going through.
Hannah, that makes me so excited that you're going into like healthcare, because we definitely need more like social work mindseted people within healthcare, because there's so many different things that like you don't realize the healthcare system like pries on, and then you get in there and yeah, so that makes me really excited for you.
Yeah, my mom is actually a social worker in a hospital. And so like her whole job is like figuring out, like a lot of her job is like helping the homeless people because they stay there, and she kind of describes it as like uses it as a hotel because like they have nowhere else to go, like no one else is helping them. Hotel or homeless shelters are full, so like she's trying to bring the social work into the hospital kind of.
Yeah, and kind of going off of what you said, I also thought about going into healthcare, but I'm actually going to go into education now. And I think it's really important to have these people that are knowledgeable in this field, like Emmy was saying, that think like a social worker, because I want to work. I don't know if I want to go towards the lower grades or the upper grades, but I feel like wherever I am, just the fact that I can think like a social worker and advocate for all of my students, I think that'll help the whole entire district in the long run if there's more and more people that have that mindset that are present in this career field.
I 110% agree, Shelby. That is so exciting. I can't wait to see what happens with that, because yeah, it's definitely like was it today we were talking about like the student who went into the classroom thing, how it's like she didn't expect to see a teacher be so blatantly like racist towards a Black student. Like we definitely need people who are just aware, because the education system, oh man, there's so many problems. Like y'all just listed out like 80 different problems. It's like there's so many. Yeah, so that's really exciting.
Yeah, that's why I'm an education psych major, because I've been a coach. I know how to, guide children and go by the curriculum, because I still have to take education courses. But the fact that I can take psych and take social work courses and stuff like that, it just opens my mind to so many different areas of teaching, not just how to do it.
I love it. So yeah, we're approaching this 27-minute mark. But yeah, I guess I'll share super quick. So I'm a social work major. That means I have no idea what I want to do in my future, because there's so many avenues of social work and so many problems that I'm just like, yeah, da, da, da. So I've been thinking I really want to work with immigrants and refugees. I'm minoring in Spanish currently, but then the other week I was like, the criminal justice system. So sis does not know what she wants to do. But we'll see. But there's just like no matter what avenue, it's like I know that I'm going to be dealing with more majority vulnerable populations, i.e. like minority populations, like Jessica was saying, just because the way the world works, unfortunately. But that's just like, I don't know if I want to work with kids, adults, like there's just a lot of room for movement right now. But yeah, I just feel like these resources have really opened my eyes to like the biases that I have. And we love to say like, oh, I love everyone and I have no biases, and then we see someone who's different and we're like, whoa. So I think it'll be really good to open eyes to like have the knowledge on how I work as a person and how I can best like not fix but like change my mindset to kind of like Greta was saying, realizing like I'm not always right and there is always room to grow is going to be super important. So yeah, gosh, I wish we had more time to talk. You guys are awesome.
Thank you for such a good conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank y'all. Seriously, this is great.
Does anyone have any like final closing remarks? Well, I'm going to stop recording then.